A growing trade row between the United States and Brazil continues to make headlines this week. And this is not just about tariffs, it's also deeply political. The American President Donald Trump has imposed steep tariffs on Brazilian imports, linking them to the legal troubles of his far-right ally Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Brazil's current president, Lula da Silva, is now caught in a high-stakes political and economic standoff that could affect prices right here at home for him in the United States. The 50% tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump on Brazilian goods aren't just about trade. They are in fact a direct response to what Donald Trump calls a witch hunt against the former Brazilian leader Jair Bolsonaro. Now, Bolsonaro, a close Trump ally, is facing charges for allegedly plotting a coup after losing Brazil's 2022 election to President Lula. But Lula has made it pretty clear. Brazil's judicial system is independent and he has no power or desire to interfere.
Measures to be taken, and Itamaraty will take them. We can appeal to the World Trade Organization, propose international investigations, demand explanations. But the main thing is the reciprocity law passed by Congress. And there's no doubt that first we'll try to negotiate, but if there's no negotiation, the reciprocity law will be put into practice. If he charges us 50%, we'll charge him 50%.
Well, tariffs this steep will hurt. Brazil isn't as dependent on U.S. trade as other countries. The United States, in fact, is the recipient of just about 12% of Brazilian exports. It's worth about 1% of Brazil's GDP. In contrast, China takes more than double that. Brazil actually runs a trade deficit with the United States, meaning that it imports more from the United States than it exports to it. But American consumers could, of course, feel the pain. Brazilians are protesting Donald Trump's action against their country while also rallying behind their president. Demonstrators have been burning Trump's effigy. They're chanting slogans such as "Brazil is ours." Listen in.
Brazil does business with other countries, so just as we depend on them, they also depend on us, and perhaps even a little more. But it's time for them to understand that Brazil, Latin America, is not their backyard. We can't just be taxed and think that's okay.
Now, President Lula, facing an election next year and lagging in polls, has responded defiantly, calling Donald Trump an emperor and promising that Brazil is not going to accept American tutelage. Still, his government is now exploring ways to try and de-escalate. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. Raymond E. Vickery, who's the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development and Senior Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Vickery, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. I want you to weigh in, on the 50% tariffs that Donald Trump has slapped on Brazil, not for commercial reasons, it appears, but for political reasons, because he feels that Jair Bolsonaro, someone who's known as the Trump of the tropics, is being subjected to a political witch hunt. Do you think this is the path the American president should pursue?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with WION. The world is one. And it requires for development of peace and prosperity, cooperation between nations, especially great democracies like the U.S., India, Brazil, Canada. Unfortunately, President Donald Trump's approach is exactly the opposite of that. It is a transactional, what's in it for me. And in this case, of course, it's very personal because what Bolsonaro is accused of is very similar to what happened in the United States on January 6, 2021, when President Trump tried to get a mob to come up and overturn the elections which he lost in 2020. So it's very personal for him. I think that going forward, it is necessary to keep in mind that this is not fight between Brazil and the United States. It's actually a fight between President Trump and the World Trade Organization, the order which we've had since World War II for trade, and he's trying to change it. Now, this is an escalation in that because there is no economic component to this. This is purely political. The American courts, in the first instance, ruled that he didn't have the power to do it, and the appellate court has put that on hold while they hear briefings. So it's very doubtful that President Trump even has the legal authority to be able to go forward on this.
Right.
I think that what has to happen is that Brazil and other countries have to hold tight. You know, Wall Street has said President Trump is taco. Trump always chickens out when it comes to tariffs. So that, it seems to me, is necessary for this to go forward.
All right. Now, Brazil is one issue. Another country that's also a lot in the limelight is Canada. 35% tariffs on Canada. The United States and Canada were some of the closest allies in the world. But by doing what he's doing, is Donald Trump allowing countries like China to take the space that America earlier occupied?
Well, of course he is. You know, it used to be that the President of the United States was known as the leader of the free world. Unfortunately, this transactional, what's in it for me approach of President Trump has forfeited that title. And what has happened is that there's a vacuum, and of course China, other authoritarian nations are going to try to fill that. So it's very counterproductive. And of course, in the Canadian situation, it goes against an agreement which President Trump himself had negotiated during his first term in office in Trump point one. And so this makes no sense at all. It's not the way to run a railroad, much less an international trading system.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Raymond Vickery, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you for having me.